So thank you for participating today. I want to make this interactive. I don't have the answer to everything. I have what works for me, and I think what has, at least in my observation, has worked for a number of folks. So as I did mention, and we don't have, if you did have, I was anticipating somewhat of a larger crowd, but the facility, whatever. If you have any questions, and actually there are some, bingo, cool. What social media must be and how frequently do you need to post? Okay, yes, I don't cover specifically, but I will cover that. With an increased loss of local newspapers, yes. How are communicating? Yes. Papers are disappearing. Print editions are certainly disappearing. The other piece that's been in the news, Twitter is now going to get potentially bought by this guy Elon Musk, who has a different idea. I mean, he doesn't really know what First Amendment rights are anyway, so that's another whole story. But we'll try to avoid some of those political things, but we will get into those specifically. So yes, and then while we have those, and I'll include those in, feel free to interrupt along the way. This is very casual. I will cover some principles. You know, own your home, feed those who love you, location, 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 content in context, phone home, kind of the summarizes, and then just rinse and repeat. It takes a process. You got to do it a lot. The replay, because I wasn't sure they were going to do the piece. So the project delivered, team happy, customer related. My objective for this session is that this is our team. You should be able to come away from the session with at least one thing, if not more, that you can take away. And if you are indeed happy, then the organizers will be elated and I'll be happy too, so indeed. One piece that we hadn't touched on, but part of what I'm doing is integrating in with Franklin TV and cable, which is also recording us today. The long-term vision, we will have one site, Franklin News. You'll be able to watch one of the 3 Franklin channels, listen, WFPR.FM, or the podcast on demand, and then read the Franklin Matters News. So it'll be the one place. And yes, to your point, in terms of while the print is going away, the digital more and more will become the way to know and keep informed what's going on in the future. So the digital presence will become much more important. And where we start. This slide you'll see a bunch today. I think it's replicated 5 or 6 times. The content. And this is where in each of your perspectives, your org, your being is at that heart of the matter, right? So that'll differ amongst us potentially. Yes, we're all arts organizations in one way or another, or interested in arts, we're arts advocates. But picture and focus what I say from your heart, because that's really the humanity that'll come out through the performances, through the social media sharing, et cetera. If it doesn't come through, that's some of the opportunities I think you'll have. You need to own, and I think in this next piece. Yeah, so your home, that heart piece, you really should own. And particularly in a day where Facebook, Twitter is in between, Instagram, all these social tools, you don't own them. You're part of what they have there. And if you've ever tried to take out the email of your followers on Facebook, you can't do it, right? So you need your home, your website, your blog, because then you can set up your email list, and that is your content, your social tracking. That's your gold. Is now you know somebody came to you, commented, bought a ticket, you've got their email, now you can set up for them for future marketing, future communications. Right? But you need to own that. And because we are all people, we need to, and while I was in my career, there was this point where corporate made a move, laid off 3,000 folks. Now I had to figure out how I'm going to get a new position. And along the way in networking, one of the key pieces was as you go to a networking event, treat the networking event as if people were coming to your home, right? So when we have guests over, even if it's family members or the neighbors coming in, you welcome the people at home because this is your place, right? So be welcoming, set up that welcome, set up that front porch that it is welcoming. Replicate that to your website. Use that approach in your communications. Be personal. You're not just an org, you're made up of people and you're delivering services to people. It's a challenge, and there's going to be a whole lot of things we could go deeper on, and hopefully we'll get to that as we get into more of the Q&A stuff. A lot of people think also that I spend an awful lot of time on the front page, the home page. And granted, that's an important piece, but it's far more important, especially with Google and even YouTube and other search engines. If they search for particular terms, that site is going to bring you somewhere on your website that's going to be way down off the home page, because that was the specific contact they came for. So make sure that page has the navigation capability so that they can stay and, oh, I got this, but I want to do something else. What else do they have? So that they can navigate, as opposed to getting lost on your page or frustrated with your page and then have to go somewhere else, right? So you want to keep them and manage them within that. One of the pieces we'll get to in my wrap as well, but I do that. So Franklin Matters and now with the Franklin.news, that's my home base. Everything goes to the page. And then elsewhere. I see people, and from time to time, certainly on a twit, I'll be doing tweets today during the day. I did an Instagram post with the Arts Advocate picture before. Those are kind of event-based things, but then I'll use them to report and then bring them back to the page. But for everything that I'm normally doing, it starts on the page. And then I've got an RSS feed, which for techies, they like, because then they don't have to come to your page every single time. Once you post something on the page, once you change something on the page, they get an RSS automatically. Not everybody wants it, but you can at least enable it on your site, and it's there, and then your accessibility is covered. I do a newsletter, as mentioned, once a day. It arrives generally in the mailboxes between 10 and 11, right? So it's dependable, it's there. I do a podcast or on-demand radio. I also have time slots on the radio. My tweets, as I mentioned, I do schedule. So whatever's on the page, I then schedule over the day to go out via Twitter. And there are tools to do that, right? And like Thread Reader is the tool that I had seen a couple of years ago. They've improved it. Now when I'll do a tweet stream or a thread, so I'll link threads, particularly at a meeting. Town council meeting had, 40 tweets. This tool now puts them all in one nice, easy to read PDF document. Much easier, because I had been doing cut and paste for that. This, boom, nice and easy. $30 a year. It's not going to break the bank, but it works. And Instagram and et cetera. So we'll refer back to this in terms of what you do. But again, it's the heart, your content. And then in terms of the next piece, we'll talk about the community in kind of 3 sections. What you really want to do is feed those who love you. So in that 3 sections, in the big world, everybody is effectively in the community. But realistically, you're going to have some who are going to be aware of, maybe come to you once in a while. They're the partially engaged ones. And then there's going to be those who are going to buy your tickets, subscribe to your newsletter, send you information, comment it. Those are the ones who are fully engaged. Feed them. And a quote from another Steve Farber wrote a book. I met him at a conference a couple years ago. Cool guy. Do what you love in the service of those who love what you do. And if you focus on that, Simple thing, going back to treating yourself in the home and the front porch. That's where you're going to focus. And one of the reasons, as an aside, I left Facebook from a Franklin Matters perspective because Facebook was constantly promote this, boost this, boost this. One of their boosts said, you can reach 237 million people. Yeah, I could, but I'm talking about Franklin, Mass. There's 33,000 people, 20,000 voters. I don't want 237 million or billion people. That's not my market. Now, going back to the content and the heart, depending on what your topic is, it may be larger than 30,000. You may be getting into that worldwide market. But not everybody is. So do what you love in the service of those who love what you do. Back to the content, but then how do you go after those who clearly you could go after everybody. You don't necessarily want to go after those who are the partially. How do you go after the ones who are your followers? Location, location, location is an old-time term. It still makes a whole lot of sense today. Where are your people? Go where they are. What kind of demographics do you have, whether it's via the email and the social tools, and each tool on the social media has some demographic breakdowns. When I was on Facebook, 35 to 50 females were my largest segment of followers. It was nice to know. Then you can use that, because those are the ones who are doing the engagement. Facebook, of course, has a separate piece, because even though I had 5,000 users, 200 to 1,000 would get it. The 5,000 wouldn't unless you boosted it, unless you did whatever, because of that famous Facebook algorithm that they know, but nobody else does. So there are pros and cons to all the social tools and all social sites. I just gave one of the big drawbacks of Facebook. You don't know what the algorithm is, right? So you can't really control how do you get your message out. We can do it. Not everybody that has followed is going to get it. Email actually is probably one of the better ways, because once, maybe a few will get into the spam filter, but if you've got 1,000 people on your email address, 900 plus are going to get that email. Are they going to read it? That's another story. But if you make it engaging, or if you make it such that they know it's going to come in at a certain time and they know it's going to give info, they're going to go to get it. Right? And it may be for other organizations, you just do it in front of an event in time for planning to make sure you coordinate your schedule to do an event. Found this quote recently attributed to Abraham Lincoln, known for making a lot of good statements. Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions. He makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to be executed. That ties back into even Michael's comments in the keynote, right? And our legislators, state and local level with the town council, if public sentiment says we want a rail trail, we want an arts thing, that will happen somehow, because there's enough people in the public that want it. It will happen. Maybe not immediately, but it will happen. But if we don't build the public sentiment, guess what? It's not going to happen. And that's our opportunity. How do we create that public sentiment? How do we create that sentiment? The sentiment can be a great event, a series of great events, then you become word of mouth, and then people say, well, where are you going to go? Well, go here. What are you going to do? Go there, right? All that comes, and it takes time. Doesn't happen overnight. You know, the proverbial, you can't just put the seed in the ground and expect to harvest it the next day, right? Care and feeding of that garden, watering, tending the weeds, and over time, it blossoms and you get great fruit from it. Back to our heart to still bring things together, we're going to talk about content in context. So there was a cool story, and I'll pick up on the theme of, while it's nice and warm outside, picture mid-July, normally. Mid-July, 80s, 90s, summer day, clearly, you're on a country road, and in western Pennsylvania, I go there periodically, they have a saying, the corn is knee-high by the 4th of July, right? So it's that country road, the corn is there, glorious sunshine day, and along the road, there's this wooden piece of scrap with some nice painting on it, says, fresh vegetables ahead. In that context, summer road, the corn is up, the sun is shining, you can bet that the vegetables at that stand had dew on them in the morning because they were that fresh. The content in the context, right? Same road, half mile down, maybe around the corner, similar sign, free flying lessons. Doesn't quite give you the same comfort level, and yet it may be that the farmer part-time is an airline mechanic, and that plane is the best thing in the world because he uses it, and he also has a side job spraying some other farms, etc. But as opposed to, you know, from a Delta or an American Airlines, it's not quite the same piece. So beware of content in context. And again, wearing the hat of what's your message, what's your mission, what's your context, and hence what is your content. Putting that in that realm. Because then if it's you and it's understandable and you've built the brand, people go, oh, good, bingo, I'll do that. As opposed to, what? Really? Include as much in that personal call to action, right? Because again, you're setting up a personal relationships. It still comes down to a person buying a ticket or a person coming to the door, a person doing something, right? You need that personal relationship. And those relationships take time. You can become acquaintances, but then it takes time to become friends. It takes time to really get to the serious discussions with some of those friends. Right? It takes time. And that leads into, going back to the reminder, I believe my success is, it's not just Steve says, I've got the notes, I've got the links, I've got all the substance, so somebody can read the headline and then go as deep as they need to get the information they want. So again, position yourself back in the heart of whatever your matter is, whatever your delivery is, whatever your piece is, how do you answer that for you? And that may change. And this one? Yeah, so the final piece, phone home, right? So remember, for those, and we're most in the I just blew it, E.T., right? The famous phone home, right? All of your social posts ideally should bring people back to your home, right? And this is one of the pros and cons. Instagram, you can't put a link on the post so that they can follow it for more. Now, coincidentally, there's some tools, so now you can have like a link thread, et cetera, in your bio. But what? The user then has to read, go to your bio, and then follow the link. For some that are truly art and focused on the photo, et cetera, that can work because that's your community, they'll do that. Twitter, for some, you're going to have the capability of including the link right in the tweet. Again, you still have the 240 characters, but you can put a photo, you can put the text, enough of a teaser, enough of that personal call, and then bring to whether it's to buy tickets, to find the full article, to find the notes you're sharing, right? It brings you back to phone home. Oh, and I had found this group a couple of years ago, I think it was 2018. They did this. This is the verse. So this is one of my go-to phrasings. I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos, uplift the negative, show up at the table again and again and again. I close my mouth and learn to listen. And the final point there is this: listening to your readers, followers, subscribers, users, however your people. Listen to them. They tell you a whole lot. In some cases, you'll listen to them and do what they need. In some cases, well, yeah, but it's still something you should consider. So, that much was my spiel, and I think we covered a little bit of how frequently and it depends. So, I'll use black box temporarily. Their frequency should be however they need for an event, right? For Franklin, I'm doing the news. News happens daily, so I'm doing daily. Which either one can work. It's a matter of expectation setting and then delivering, right? So people expect, and I do get emails and calls, and like, Steve, I didn't get your email. What happened today, right? And if all of a sudden, an email from the black box, not in 2 or 3 weeks, you go check your spam filter, it's like, there's no events, right? You set the expectation. There's things happening, there's going to be an email. And again, you're not going to overdo it. You're not going to send 14 emails because you got one event tomorrow, right? Again, content in context, one of the other principles, right? So the frequency will depend on the message and the quantity of, or what you're trying to do. That make sense? And this one, with the increased loss of social, how our community is getting their information. I hope they're going to digital, and I hope they're using the digital tools. One of the other pieces that I'm also investigating, and I realized that, like the Disability Commission, especially specifically now that I'm getting into TV, radio more and integrating overall, the delivery of Franklin's information across multiple channels is improving. I want to make sure we make it as accessible to all as possible. And then we get back into kind of that segmentation. So Franklin's 33,000 people, 20,000 voters, the 5,000 to 6,000 families who have kids in schools, they're an easy market to the extent that they're definable. All the sports organizations and all the schools, that's where they are. The very young, we'll exclude them because we'll tap them through, et cetera. The seniors, through the senior center and other channels, no, those are definable. But like an old term of double income, no kids, where are those folks? How do we get at them? How many are there in Franklin for us, right? But then one of the things that as we were listening from the coverage we did during the last election cycle, and again, Franklin specific, but many folks here are all Franklin anyway, we were piloting and we still are piloting so that when Frank Falvey would interview a candidate and put it on TV, potentially he would also put that on an audio for a podcast. I did my podcast, and then we also tapped in to try and do a text script, transcript of the event or interview, and then share that as well. So via text, the audio, and the video, you can get it 3 different ways. And it was reinforced because somebody who is sight impaired could at least listen, and as well somebody who is hard of hearing could watch and or read. So now how do we make so that whatever is done, particularly from a campaign perspective, we have it in all three. We covered kind of two of the three. We don't have all three all the time.
So I'm curious. I work with the live arts, which is
Sure.
with classical
Yep.
music, and a lot of our audience are seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that seniors are more and more engaged with the internet and would get their news there?
They're struggling to do so, and I know also from a personal perspective, my mother-in-law is 90. She got a cell phone, smartphone, not just a smartphone, 3 years ago. We started with sharing Google Photos so that she could find the great-grandkids. Now she's starting to text. Now she's starting to do email. So it's taking time, and clearly she's kind of a case of one, but I've been hearing others doing something similar. So again, knowing and listening to, that was one of the key things. How do I find out what Tommy's doing or Aiden's doing? Photos, and they're easy. Now, if iPhone has certain similar sharing things, I use Google, we're in a Google thing, so Google Photo is an easy to share. There are, and I know, especially between Horace Mann assisting periodically the seniors at the senior center with tech issues from time to time, right? That's something where the crossing of an educational organization to create that connectability, that's always a possibility. We can do more of that, right? Because certainly if something comes up, there could be like a Franklin help desk, right? So, and not just the senior could have an issue, but we've got, quote, digital natives who are used to this all the time. Tap into them so that they get some of those cross-sharing of the skills, et cetera. There's opportunities there, Oh, son, no, quite right, yeah. We have plenty of time, so we'll get to all of them.
So Steve, that we're all inundated with communication.
Yes.
Whether it's tweets or
Yep,
posts or
yeah.
email. How do you make your message pop to do that? Because that's always been a challenge
Yeah.
for us.
The key there, I think, is looking back and thinking about, again, the feeding those who love you, focusing truly on that particular message. If I keep my mindset that when I'm at the keyboard, what do I need to know? And I'll put a slight plug in. So climate change and all the iterations, this IPCC report just came out, and it's like, how do we do this? So there's a guy in the community, Ted McIntyre, and we're doing a regular podcast now helping me make sense of climate. So he's deciphering some of his climate activism stuff, and I'm hopefully making some sense of it, and then hopefully leading folks to start understanding what that's going on as well. There was another point I was going to make. Can you refresh the question? Because
what I was trying to get at, with so many different choices
Yes,
you have in
right,
media,
yeah.
How do you make that message pop?
you make the message true to in terms of the content and the context. Because if you make it pop such that I know people, there are, quote, schools, we'll make it viral. You can't make it viral. The virality is inherent in whatever that message is. If it's going to be that cute kid or cute kitten, and it just has that human touch at that moment, it's going to go. But there's no guarantee that kitten is going to be successful the next week, right? Because then you kind of get into that slippery slope. How many cute kittens can you really follow, right? I think if you stay true to the key, the details, with that personal approach, it'll happen. Because then it becomes kind of that collaborative piece in terms of the location, the content and context. Those who are engaged will find you, subscribe, and then pay attention when, oh, that's tomorrow, or I need to do this now, right? And it may not happen immediately, but at least you've created the mindset, oh, if something's coming, where do I go? They'll come back to get that info. Right? Raylene, I think?
This is not my question
No,
from
no.
before, but we had a kind of an interesting thing happen at intermission. One of our Broadway guests, talking about not being able to make it do what you wanted to do. One of our Broadway guests came for coffee and just randomly did this video in intermission about, oh, look at this place, it's cool, it's theater themed, and this is, put the music of Waitress in the background.
Right.
110,000 views.
Right.
And people drove an hour and a half, and I could see who they were, because it was a middle school drama kid and her father who was forced to drive her an hour and a half to come where Chris Rice said to go. And then I said, "Oh, will you try it again?" And he made one for us. Nothing.
Yeah.
So it's so frustrating
It is, yeah.
because in terms of trying to create content, make something that's going to pop,
Right,
make something that people will pay attention to.
Yeah.
You try and it doesn't happen, and
No.
then something offhand like that.
Yeah. Another example goes back to, I think, actually 2008, because Miriam Goodman was one of 3 candidates for the school committee to interview for the business administrator, and she's still in that role today. So similar to what they had done recently, there were 7 school committee members, 14 questions, 2 questions each. Business administrator, school business administrator interview questions. That 8 words, right, became the headline. It was nothing sexy about it. That today, and you can go back and check, put in those 8 words in Google, and my page is still in the top 10 for that, because no matter anywhere in the English-speaking world, if they're looking for school business administrator interview questions, guess what? 2008 school committee, those 14 questions still pop up in the top 10. I did not intend that, to your point, right? She did not intend that in terms of what she was doing, but sometimes you just hit, and it's there. Or miss, right? But if you hit and then they come again to that other piece, make sure that at least they can say, oh, there's something else here. Oh, and make that navigation nice and easy. Well, there's this one event, now maybe I'll come back to another event. And then that's money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have one family involved from Hopkinton that came for coffee because of that silly TikTok moment, and they're still there. So it turned into, but we didn't create it. So when you're sitting there beating your head against the wall trying to market things, and you realize it's random, boy, oh boy, that's frustrating.
Well, and that's where, going back to the location, know where they are. And if they are on Instagram, as an example, then be on Instagram. And when they do share that on Instagram, you follow them. Right? And then include them potentially where it makes sense. Don't spam them, but engage that way in those social channels. That way, somebody next to that person in their circle, right? And again, we go back to the circles, right? So you're talking to a person here. Now there's a person out there who, they're partially engaged, but they heard this is happening. Now they may become more engaged.
But
So you get the
it sounds
loop.
like in your case, that Florida person, she was an influencer, and people who were following her, those were probably all her followers.
To some degree, but also people who search theater stuff. I'm not on TikTok yet.
No, and I would advise, there may be a market there. I don't advise it. There's,
I mean, that was the...
Within, and going back to scrolling, in most websites, particularly if you've got a blog, within that, it should also give you a report on key search terms and key terms of how people are coming to you. Be aware of those. Use those to your advantage. Not necessarily to populate those terms in single every, because you're going to disappoint some folks. If you put that one term in everything and they read it and find out it's not about that, you just lost them, right?
So, if I can be a little bit more technical.
Sure.
It looks like you're frowning on Facebook as a tool for social media, or not?
I still, while I don't deliver my content to Facebook, I personally am still on Facebook because of other family connections. So because of that, I'm also less on Facebook. It used to be when I was putting my stuff out there, I had the same scheduling program. I would have things and then people would comment. Some comments were spammy. I'd get rid of those. You'd have to manage all that content. I've gained that much time back in the day. I don't have to manage that mess, respectfully. There are still good folks out there, et cetera. I understand that. So, but I'm also out there, and occasionally when I go out there, I'll find things that within my radar are content that I want to feed my community.
So as a small organization like ours, are there certain platforms that we should be on? Like, should we be on Twitter? Should we be on Facebook?
I would say Twitter at least, because of the key benefit. You can put, the quick short phrase, a picture, you've got a pianist or a duet or whatever, and the link, all important, to come to your page to buy a ticket, right? That's in the 240.
With his demographics? Based on his demographics, wouldn't you recommend Facebook also?
That's the decision. And again, because of Facebook as an infrastructure, I did not want, and again, part of my corporate background, I was in risk management and security, et cetera, because of what Cambridge Analytica, et cetera, had done with the data, and it still is potential there. I don't want to run the risk of my 5,000 followers being exposed to their nefarious practices. That was a personal choice I made. You're going to have to make a similar choice.
I'm just thinking that his demographic, your demographic, might be more likely to be on Facebook than Twitter.
A lot of ours. Yeah.
Right. And and as now I'm getting into this from a TV radio perspective, we may go back to Facebook, but put our posts as a default with no comment, simply to that point of at least hitting the demographic, understanding that even if we got 5,000 and 1,000 see it, those 1,000 can at least continue to share, as opposed to having to manage that entire, mostly nefarious content in some cases. It's just atrocious.
Originally, I was going to ask,
Absolutely.
what
No,
are the
yeah.
numbers currently for the readership, viewership, and listeners for the Franklin?
For Franklin Matters? Yeah. It varies to the extent that I've got, I've got readers and followers in the different places. So I think it's up to 1,900 on Twitter. I think it's 1,100, 1,200 via the email newsletter, which has also been growing. Instagram, I haven't looked at the number recently. And then I also get, primarily, and then the page itself. So the Franklin Matters page, and that varies, right? So clearly around, and I tend to have kind of a gradual during the year because respectfully the budget, I understand the budget is important and it shows our priorities, but people really don't pay attention to the budget. But every 2 years when that election comes, there's a growth. So generally in November, that night of election results, there's 15 to 20,000 people hitting that post with the election results. Because I can put the post there before the town clerk does, and people go and they want that. The other unfortunate incidents, the person who got killed, unfortunately, and then even the January 6th vigil, those two also generated spikes. Because people were coming to see, if they didn't go there, I had the brief videos of both of those, or she had the TV video, those were catchers. And historically, and I don't like to track those numbers per se because it's the bad stuff that happens, but people come at least to get the good information as opposed to some of the other stuff that's out there.
How about the radio and TV? How's that?
The rate, I'll have to defer to Pete. I know he's done a presentation. He just got requested to do an update to the budget, the finance committee coming sometime in the summer. It's my understanding that across the, and it's also changing too because Franklin TV is now broadcasting the government meetings directly to YouTube, right? So we start as Zoom, go to Verizon, Comcast, live stream, and then directly to YouTube. So it's the one all the way through. Subscriber will have to watch. There's only like 15 the first week, but individually 20 to 30 on an individual meeting.
Do you think the listenership and the viewership is Franklin proper? Probably, right?
Yes and no, but it's interesting too because I always threw some comments and if you remember when I was starting, or you may not remember, I was highlighting little photos of little pieces. So actually one of them was the little curlicue arch on the entrance doorways to the FSPA. I just shared just the photo. Where is this? Right? Again, trying to reinforce content and context. If I showed you the big picture, you knew it was the FSPA building. But if I showed you the little curlicue, could people identify it? And generally people did within a day or two. The smiley, the first response was somebody from Ohio who had lived in Franklin and said, I know what that is, it's Malloy's, right? So the other piece that's coming up, more anecdotal, but particularly during the pandemic, the high school sports were being live streamed. So grandparents in Florida and California were now able to watch their nieces and nephews, and they couldn't before, right? So it's hard to catch those demographics because they're in different pieces. They're not always on the website. Some are there. It's growing.
To Franklin TV's credit, I mean, when we were performing virtually during all that time,
Yes.
I mean, we reached international audiences.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It was really
Absolutely.
exciting and fun,
Yeah.
and when our guests come in, we're definitely reaching other parts of the country because they have family.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's-
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the pieces that I want to bring to the org. As much as they do, they're not doing social, so I want to do more of the social.
that way, yeah.
Yeah,
Do you advertise on Franklin TV? Do you advertise?
We don't advertise, so that was part of my actually reason for asking.
Yeah, well, when we don't advertise, we do PSAs.
They do PSAs.
Yeah.
So we're
Right, and we've got the community announcements, community bulletin board. We're going to be enhancing that.
We need to be more active in that. We definitely need to be more active in that.
So if I would like to include our events in something that you might be promoting, do you have a criteria, or is there a place where I can, what your timetable is?
I subscribe to your email newsletter, so I get that and share that on a regular basis. If you've got some other specific details behind that, et cetera, my email, which is also on, I don't have it up at the moment, but franklinmatters.org, you've got my card. That's my email. Send it to me. Yeah, yeah. I generally have it. I generally have all the black.
Information central.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
Because, trying to put this all in my head and being not of this generation of this stuff,
Yep.
the biggest thing I always ask is how do we get the engagement from the community? We know we have, 33,000 people
Yeah.
roughly, and there's a segment of people in this town that quite frankly, they're here, they work elsewhere, they're not interested. Exactly.
The unengaged.
But the unengaged.
Some of the
You've gotta
partially
actually
engaged.
get them to a certain
That's
extent and not
right.
put your time.
That's why I said feed
Right.
feed
The
those
feed
below.
and get, exactly. So, how else do we get that message out to them? I mean, does it take a personal phone call? I mean, you do a great job by putting it out there, and as you said, people are gonna look for things and they'll eventually come to you.
Right.
But is there something else that we could be doing?
Yeah. The only other piece I think is, and again, listen to where your users are and where they go. So social is one place. We have other places. So co-branding, or the table out at the entrance here, right? A table, and I know you've done it similarly at other times, having a table for the farmer's market, having the nonprofit table there, putting a presence there. One of the pieces that I'm working on is just a simple, 8.5, 11, catchy, TV, news, radio, Franklin Matters, and put it in some of the shops. Whether Poor Richard's, Birchwood rather, 67 Degrees, the places where people go, where people are already aligned with us, a la Escape into Fiction with their art show space in the back. Think of other places where either you go, even if it's a Honeydew, even if it's a Dunkin', they're in Franklin, why not? And we do need to wrap, because technically this is going to be the kind of break before the next one. I do this again, and then clearly if you've got additional questions, I'm here, we can do it at lunch. And I'm here. I'm around also as well.
Education in this, you know, like I don't hate to use the word course, but some type of content that we could, and bring our computers and learn. I mean, that's
Right.
the visual part of things.
Agreed, yeah. Yeah, and that's an opportunity. I'll put that slight plug. So monthly I do a Franklin Matters question and answers at the Senior Center. I'm considering doing another one kind of, because some people still have hesitancy about going to the Senior Center because they're not seniors. But if we can find a space and do that and then pick a time where, and then people will do it. So how do we do this? How do we do this? So it's akin to an open mic, but I want more of an open session. It's kind of like a Franklin help desk for tech publicly, that much. So thank you for participating today.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.